For most of the 20th century, citrus was Florida's economic engine. It created billions in revenue, lifted entire towns out of poverty, and turned the state into an agricultural empire. And for decades, the money felt endless. So profitable, people called it liquid gold. But today, that empire is almost gone. I'm standing in what used to be one of Florida's most productive orange groves about an hour south of Orlando. But if you drove past this spot today, you'd never know it. The trees are gone, the packing house sits abandoned, and the land where more than 100,000 orange trees once grew is now just empty ground waiting for the next suburban development. Florida went from producing 244 million boxes of oranges in 1997 to just 14.5 million today, a 94% collapse. And here's the part almost nobody outside of Florida understands. This isn't a bad decade. This isn't a temporary setback. This is the permanent end of Florida as America's citrus powerhouse. The disease that caused this collapse has no cure. Once a tree is infected, it dies within 5 years. And even after hundreds of millions of dollars in research, we're still almost a decade away from a real solution. But to understand how the state's most powerful industry collapsed this fast, we need to go back to when Florida citrus was at its peak and when industry looked invincible. Florida's relationship with citrus goes back centuries, but the modern industry really took off after the Second World War. By the 1990s, Florida produced over 70% of America's citrus. More than 832,000 acres were covered in orange groves. There were nearly 8,000 growers, 41 processing facilities, an industry worth almost $9 billion. Drive through Central Florida in the 90s and you'd see nothing but citrus in every direction. The Florida Citrus Tower in Claremont was built in 1956 specifically so tourists could climb 226 feet up and look out over the endless sea of orange trees. On a clear day, you could see groves stretching 35 miles in every direction. It was less about the oranges themselves and more about the juice. Florida orange juice became synonymous with breakfast in America. Tropicana, Minute Maid, Florida's Natural, with their commercials about 100% Florida oranges.
Tim, are you drinking from the container?
100% pure Florida quality orange juice.
That morning glass of OJ, you better bet it came from Florida. The industry supported over 75,000 jobs. Multi-generational family farms where grandparents, kids, and their children all worked the same groves their family had owned for a century. But in 1998, something arrived in Florida that would destroy all of this. Something tiny, something that most people couldn't even see without a magnifying glass. The Asian citrus psyllid. In June 1998, someone noticed an unusual insect in a backyard citrus tree in Palm Beach County. It was only 3 to 4 millimeters long, a tiny brownish thing that fed on the leaves of citrus trees. Agricultural officials identified it as the Asian citrus psyllid, native to Asia. So here's where the first mistake happened. They knew this insect could carry a devastating citrus disease, but the disease hadn't been detected in Florida yet, just the insect. So the response was measured, cautious. They tracked it, studied it, implemented some quarantine zones, but they didn't treat it like the existential threat it would become. By 2001, the psyllid had spread to 31 counties, mostly through infected nursery plants that got shipped around the state. Once it was that widespread, containing it became essentially impossible. But still, no disease, just the insect, and for 7 years that's how it stayed. Then in August 2005, a grove in Miami-Dade County tested positive for citrus greening disease, Huanglongbing, or HLB for short, the disease the psyllid carries. And that's when everything changed. Here's how citrus greening works and why it's so devastating. The psyllid feeds on citrus leaves. When it does, it injects bacteria into the tree's phloem. That's the plant's circulatory system, the tubes that transport nutrients from the leaves to the roots. Once the bacteria is inside, it spreads through the entire tree. It blocks the flow of nutrients. The tree literally begins to starve itself to death. The first symptoms show up on the leaves with asymmetrical yellowing. Then the roots start dying. The fruit becomes small, lopsided, bitter. Trees drop 50 to 60% of their fruit before it's even ripe enough to harvest. But trees can be infected for years before they show any symptoms, which means by the time you notice your grove is sick, the disease has already spread to every tree around it. In 2005, when HLB was first confirmed, it was only in Miami-Dade County. By February 2009, just 3.5 years later, the disease had been detected in all 34 Florida counties with commercial citrus. It was one of the fastest agricultural disease spreads in modern history. And the numbers started dropping immediately. 2004, the year before HLB was confirmed, 242 million boxes of oranges, market value of $746 million. 2010, 140 million boxes. 2020, 51 million boxes. 2024, 14.5 million boxes. Total collapse. The industry lost 94% of its production in just 2 decades. When an agricultural empire collapses this fast, there's a natural question. Where are the scientists? What are they trying to do to stop this? But before I show you what scientists are doing to fight back against HLB, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Odoo. Now, I'm the black sheep of the family. Everyone else is an accountant, while I got a journalism degree and spend my time hiking around national parks. But try as I might, I just can't escape the need for good accounting and organization for the Park Vibes business. Fortunately, Odoo makes it easy, even for me. Odoo is the all-in-one software platform for business. Rather than having to juggle multiple apps and logins, it's one place and you can choose only the apps you need. For me, that means accounting and invoicing. I can track my expenses from the road, pay invoices and editors easily, and rest assured that things are going to get tracked and paid on time. I may not be an accountant, but it's organization that makes even my parents proud. Odoo has a 14-day free trial of the full suite with no credit card required. No more paper receipts, inaccurate inputs, and different software. Just use Odoo. Okay, back to the story. To find out, I drove to Lake Alfred, Florida to visit the University of Florida's Citrus Research and Education Center, or CREC. This is ground zero in the fight against HLB, the place where some of the best plant scientists in the world are trying to save what's left of Florida's citrus industry. CREC sits on 120 acres in Polk County, surrounded by what used to be the heart of Florida citrus country. The facility was established in 1917, back when citrus seemed unstoppable. Today, it's become something more urgent, the last line of defense.
So it's really just a matter of time for us right now.
Yeah.
I think our research is headed in the right direction. We're making great progress. We just need a few more years, hopefully sooner rather than later, because it only takes one breakthrough. One plant that we're trialing in the field right now, if it turns out to be resistant to the disease, that is going to be what we need for the future.
Walking through the labs and greenhouses here, you can see the full scope of what they're up against. Researchers exploring CRISPR gene editing to turn off the genes that make citrus vulnerable to the bacteria. Field trials testing new rootstocks and hybrid combinations. Studies on psyllid behavior and population control. Over $300 million in research funding given to some of the best minds in the world studying agricultural science. And yet, they're still at least a decade away from a commercial solution.
One of the benefits, if you want to look for a silver lining with HLB, is the fact that we've been able to learn about new technologies. New technologies have been developed through this research. We'll come out of this stronger and have more tools available to develop new solutions to other problems we faced past or in the future.
So why is this so hard to solve? The answer reveals just how uniquely difficult citrus screening is to fight. First, every experiment has to be done on live infected trees, which takes years because you can only make a tree grow so quickly. They showed me what they're doing, culturing young trees, agitating them in special machinery, getting them ready to plant as fast as they possibly can. But nature's clock can only be sped up so much. It still takes a few years to learn whether an experiment will be successful. Second, the disease is spread by an insect that's now everywhere. Early on, Florida tried an approach that worked for citrus canker, removing infected trees and everything within 1,900 feet of them. But that was economically devastating and ultimately ineffective. The psyllid can fly. It can travel on the wind. By the time a tree shows symptoms, the insects have already moved on. Meanwhile, growers can't wait for long-term solutions. They've had to try everything. Pesticide spraying initially increased from 6 or 7 times a year to 11 or 14 times a year. That's over $1,000 per acre annually just trying to kill the psyllids. And even that doesn't work completely. The insects develop resistance. The most successful technology is called cups, or citrus under protective screens. Basically growing trees inside massive screen houses that keep the psyllids out. Groves using cups have seen incredible results, some producing 800% more fruit per acre than traditional groves, with HLB infections below 2%. But here's the problem. Cups cost $50,000 to $75,000 per acre to install. Small growers can't afford it. Even large operations struggle with that kind of capital investment. It ends up being utilized only for the highest quality fruit. Think the fancy oranges you get in a box at the holidays, not the mass numbers needed for a juice line. The reality is that none of these short-term solutions scale to save the entire industry, not until a new tree with real resistance is developed and deployed. Everything else is a survival strategy for individual growers who have the capital to implement them. On their own, these fixes won't bring back Florida's citrus empire. And while scientists work toward breakthroughs, the clock keeps ticking. Today, only about 1,500 citrus growers remain in Florida, down from almost 7,400 in 2002. That's an 80% loss. 66% of the state's processing facilities have closed, and the industry that once employed 75,000 people now employs about 32,000. In January 2025, Alico Inc., one of Florida's largest citrus operations with over 53,000 acres, announced they were getting out of the citrus business entirely. After 125 years, the CEO said simply, "Growing citrus is no longer economically viable." Everyone at CREC thinks they will win this fight. But for most of Florida's citrus growers, the breakthrough might come too late. But here's what really gets me about this story. It's not just about citrus greening, it's about how we created the conditions for this collapse to happen. Florida's citrus industry was built on monoculture. Hundreds of thousands of acres of genetically similar orange trees, all planted in neat rows, all managed the same way. It was efficient, it was profitable, and it was catastrophically vulnerable.
Research on genetic diversity makes this clear. Growing acres of the same crop creates the perfect conditions for disease to spread. There's no genetic diversity to slow it down, no resistant varieties to slow the spread, just mile after mile of identically susceptible hosts.
And when you combine that monoculture with global trade, moving insects and disease around the world faster than ever before, you get disasters like this. The Asian citrus psyllid arrived in Florida through nursery plants. International shipping made that possible. And once it was here, once it had found its way into those uniform groves, there was nothing to stop its spread. But there's something else too, something that's making all of this worse. Climate change is expanding the range where the psyllid can survive. The disease thrives in a particular temperature range, and as temperatures rise, that zone is growing. UC Davis researchers warned that California's Central Valley is right at the tipping point. A few degrees warmer in winter, and suddenly California faces the same devastation Florida did. And Florida itself is dealing with compound stressors that make recovery even harder. The state experienced its most severe drought conditions on record since 2000. Hurricane frequency continues to increase. Hurricane Ian in 2002 caused $247 million in citrus losses. Hurricane Milton in 2024 caused another $190 million. These are trees that are already weak from disease, already struggling. And then they get hit with hurricanes and droughts and heat waves that they would have survived if they were healthy. So what happens now? Is there any hope for Florida citrus to come back? The honest answer is not to what it was. Everyone admits that. Scientists are working on gene-edited varieties that turn off the genes that make citrus vulnerable to HLB. Early trials show promise, but they know it will still take years before gene-edited fruit reaches commercial production.
And so you can see here, these are sugar bell fruit. It's one of those trees that was in some of our research plots, our breeding plots, and they noticed as HLB swept through the breeding plots, all these trees are dying, but these sugar bells stood out. And now this is being used as a parent in the breeding program when they cross two citrus species trying to develop new varieties to help create the next generation of citrus.
These are promising things, but recreating the industry that was is no longer even the goal. The expert consensus is that Florida will stabilize at maybe 100,000 to 150,000 acres, down from 832,000 acres of citrus at the peak. Production of 30 to 50 million boxes a year, down from 244 million. The industry will survive, but it will be transformed. Smaller, more technology intensive, focused on specialty fresh fruit rather than juice production. Maybe cups greenhouses rather than open groves. Because the juice, that's already gone. In 2024, the United States imported nearly 90% of its orange juice, most of it from Brazil and Mexico. Even Florida's Natural, which spent decades advertising their 100% Florida oranges, started blending with imports in 2022. They didn't have a choice. There simply aren't enough Florida oranges anymore. I started this video at an abandoned grove site, but let me end it somewhere different. If you go to the Florida Citrus Tower today, the one that was built in 1956 to showcase the endless orange groves, you can still climb up to the observation deck. You can still see for 35 miles in every direction.
But what you don't see today is citrus. It's shopping centers, urban development, housing projects waiting to be developed.
Patches of remaining groves scattered here and there, but nothing like the continuous canopy that existed when the tower was built. That view tells you everything you need to know about what happened here. No one's waiting on the citrus industry to come back. They've already moved on, accepting that an American agricultural empire can collapse in a single generation. And the scary part, this could happen again to other crops in other places. Bananas are facing Panama disease, a soil-borne pathogen that's threatening the entire global supply. Coffee rust is spreading as climate change makes new regions suitable for the disease. Wheat rust is migrating with international trade and warming temperatures. The same factors that destroyed Florida's citrus industry are threatening agricultural systems worldwide. Monoculture, genetic uniformity, global trade moving pests and disease, and climate change expanding their range. We still grow crops the same way Florida grew oranges, efficiently and at massive scale. And we're learning the same lesson. What works in the short term can be catastrophically vulnerable in the long term. Dr. Rogers agreed that solving citrus greening is almost as difficult of a feat as curing cancer. There's just no silver bullet, no simple fix. It's a slow, expensive process of trying to understand something incredibly complex. But here's the thing. We didn't have decades to figure this out, not for citrus and not for the other crops that feed the world. Florida's orange juice is already gone. The question now is what else we're willing to lose before we fundamentally change how we grow food. Because the disease that ended Florida's citrus empire, it's not really about the disease at all. It's about how we built a system that couldn't survive when something went wrong. And that's a much bigger problem than just losing orange juice.